My name is Naomi, and I'm 26 years old. I'm standing in the back row of the town hall with my phone clutched like a lifeline. The wood paneling glows honey gold under the stage lights, and the man they're honoring basks in it like sunlight belongs to him. The mayor calls him a pillar. The room rises, and the clapping swells until it feels like it might lift the ceiling right off its beams. He smiles that practiced, neighbor-safe smile, the one that got him dinner invites and discounts and the benefit of every doubt. That smile used to hypnotize me. Tonight, it's just a mask with a crack running down the middle. I tap my screen. A tiny triangle turns blue. His voice pours out of the speakers, rich and confident and unafraid of daylight. Some girls need attention. That's how you teach boundaries, he says, in a low chuckle that used to make people call him charming. The laugh lands like a dropped plate. The room sucks air. The mayor's hand freezes mid-plaque. A few people look toward the sound booth like maybe the equipment is haunted. I keep my arms steady even though my pulse is a drumline. The clip ends on his laugh. The silence that follows is the first honest sound I've heard in this hall. Quick one. While you're here with me, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from.
I didn't arrive at this moment by luck. I arrived by winter. I arrived by a locked door and a voice telling me to be careful with a good man's life. I arrived by the kind of pain that makes you numb enough to keep showing up to work, to night classes, to church pews where people hug long and ask if you're doing better now. Better means quiet. Better means do not disturb. Better means be the girl who forgives, so other people don't have to look at what they clapped for. I tried. God, I tried. Forgiveness sat on my tongue like a coin. I kept flipping, praying it would land on relief. It landed on blades. I kept going because keeping going is cheaper than stopping when you don't know what will happen if you actually stop. I served cappuccinos with hearts drawn in foam at the corner cafe. I studied case notes in fluorescent classrooms and learned the language of trauma in textbooks that didn't know my name. I watched him dance through fundraisers and food drives and mentorship nights where he clapped boys on shoulders and told girls they had potential. He knew exactly how to look safe. I knew exactly how to look fine. Silence is a heavy thing. It leaks if you walk with it long enough. The first leak showed up as a girl named Taylor wrapping her sleeves over her palms when he passed the student center. Her gaze slid off his face like it was coated in oil. She didn't know I was watching, a woman a few years older with a paper cup and a memory shaped like a bruise you can't see. The second leak came as a woman at my cafe, mid-30s, kind eyes, ordering a plain latte with the careful voice of somebody managing a storm inside her chest. She jumped when a man behind her laughed. When she turned and saw who it was, she didn't just jump. She flinched like her bones knew him. He apologized for startling her with a smile I knew too well and paid for both drinks with the kind of tip that lets a man buy people's manners. You learn to save small things when you can't yet pick up the big thing. I saved a napkin from a fundraiser where he practiced benevolence for photographers. His name, a date, and the little halo he doodled beside his signature as a joke. People loved the joke. It said, "Look, even my pride has a sense of humor." I also saved a single screenshot, his text to a mutual acquaintance after I stopped volunteering. Naomi's fragile. She misreads things. If you say that sentence close enough to the right ears, people will nod like you're doing community service. I tucked it into a folder labeled "Nothing Yet." Then I waited for another leak. It came from myself. My therapist asked if I felt safe in spaces he occupied. I said yes, the way you say yes when the truth would cost too much. She cocked her head, the way good therapists do when they keep a room soft and a question sharp. "What would safe look like?" she asked. I named 5 things in the office. 4 I could touch, 3 I could hear, 2 I could smell, 1 I could taste. It's a grounding exercise, but that day it became a blueprint. Safe for me would look like a room where the truth could sit without getting shushed. So I built one. I wrote him a careful email. I thanked him for all the good you do. I said I wanted to talk. I said the words men like him trust, closure, peace, forgiveness. He picked the venue, a downtown cafe with Edison bulbs and tile meant for Instagram. He ordered for me like a man who collects small permissions. Then he talked. I nodded and learned how to move my face while my phone, pressed against a sugar caddy, listened better than anyone in that room ever had. I didn't bait him. I made myself into the kind of confessional that flatters a narcissist. He filled it. He said, "Mentorship requires a personal touch," voice low, leaning in. "Rumors happen when girls don't understand intimacy." He smiled over his cup like he had just explained algebra to a child. When I got home, my hands shook so hard I almost tapped delete instead of save. I uploaded the file to the cloud and named it by the color of his tie. That night, I texted a student advocacy hotline with a hypothetical that wasn't hypothetical. If someone well-liked is hurting people, how do you collect truth without getting crushed? They called me back. The woman on the phone had a voice that sounded like a porch light. She told me to write dates, keep receipts, make backups, change routes, tell at least one person where I was going before every meeting. "And Naomi," she added before we hung up, "you're not crazy. I believe you." I tucked her belief into my pocket like a little hot stone I could hold when my body remembered winter. The next day, I asked Kayla about her sleeves. Not the obvious way. I said, "This building is always freezing," and laughed. She laughed back and pushed her cuffs up. Then I said, "Sometimes people we're told to trust make air feel thin." Her smile dimmed. The shine in her eyes wasn't tears, it was recognition. "Can we talk somewhere else?" she whispered. We found an empty classroom that smelled like dry erase and old papers. We left the overhead lights off. I set my phone on the desk and asked her permission before I hit record. She told me how he offered her a ride when her car wouldn't start, how the door lock clicked when she reached for the handle, how he said not to be dramatic. She told me how he corrected her posture in a hallway, how his hand stayed too long, how she convinced herself she was exaggerating because everyone loved him. When she finished, we sat in the low light and listened to the hum of the building. I made 3 backups before we left. She texted me later, "I feel like I can breathe." I cried in my kitchen with the lights off because the feeling was contagious.
Marisol came next. She works with me at the cafe and once told a councilman to quit cutting the line by handing him a tray and asking if he'd like to help. She's older than me by about 10 years and keeps her hair in a bun that means business. "You're not the first," she said flatly when I asked if we could talk. We sat on milk crates in the back room between boxes of cups and sleeves, and she told me about a nonprofit gala where he cornered her beside a fake ficus. He said she should be grateful for his attention. She told herself she must be misreading. I was raised polite, she said with a shrug that held back a flood. We recorded. We labeled the file with the color of her dress from that night because facts like that hold shape when other things go fuzzy. Then came the one that split me open again, the girl he called goddaughter. Not blood, but claimed. I recognized her from photos where she sat near him at church, where he rested a hand on her shoulder, where she smiled small with her mouth and not at all with her eyes. We met at a park so we could look at ducks when it got hard to hold eye contact. She wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and spoke with the quiet cadence of someone who has grown used to measuring safety before choosing a verb. "He taught me to drive," she said. "He also taught me the sound of a lock." We recorded. She asked if we could sit in silence for 1 minute after. We did. The audio catches the sound of wind and a child calling for a dog, and the weight of truth being given a chair. I lit a candle at my sink that night. Not for him, for the girl I had been when I thought silence was safer than breath, for Kayla, for Marisol, for the goddaughter who asked for a minute of air. I lined their names on sticky notes under my cabinets and told each one, out loud, that I believed her,
that I would carry this the way you carry a box with both hands pressed close to your chest. A week later, I got the call that gave me my first twist. Naomi, this is Pastor Ruth. Her church is across town, the one that does food pantry lines without photos. I think you should come by my office. I have something I think belongs in your hands. She poured tea the way grandmothers do, slow, careful, with an extra second of eye contact. Then she slid a manila envelope across her desk. Inside were photocopies of letters. The earliest one was written in neat, looping cursive. I knew the name signed at the bottom, Miss Ann, my 8th grade English teacher, who taught me that stories are houses and some are safe to live in. She had tried to sound alarms years ago. The superintendent wrote back, "We consider this a closed matter." He signed his name with the penmanship of a man who expects his signature to end conversations. He was my ex-boyfriend's father. Grief is a shapeshifter. In high school, it looked like a breakup. Now it looked like a stack of papers that proved grown men had once decided we were acceptable collateral. I put the envelope in my backpack like it was breathing. I made a new folder on my laptop. I named it Ledger. Then I opened a blank note, wrote the sentence I wished someone had said to me the first winter, and taped it to my bathroom mirror. My silence was never consent. It was fear. My voice isn't vengeance. It's oxygen. I thought about vanishing, packing a duffel, deleting accounts, finding a cheap studio 3 states over where nobody knew how my body remembered the feel of a certain hallway. I pictured Utah sky or Carolina humidity, but then my phone pinged with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It invited me to mentorship coffee. Is that normal? The profile photo showed a girl with braces and a sweatshirt from the high school. My chest burned cold. I typed back, "Don't go alone. Tell me when and where." She sent the time, the place, the emoji people use when they want to make fear look casual. I don't believe in coincidence with men like him. They move on rails they lay themselves. He loved Tuesdays. He loved calling attention help and control mentorship. I wrote the plan at my kitchen table with my mug leaving a brown ring over the part where I wrote "back up to the backup." I texted Dana, the pro bono lawyer. "We need to go to the police with what we have. And Naomi, if you decide to confront him publicly, we do it with eyes open and cops in the room." I knew what that meant. Risk calculated, not improvised. We scheduled a meeting with a detective named Martinez, who wore exhaustion like armor and listened like a father. At the station, the air smelt like printer toner and stale coffee. Martinez put a small recorder on the table. The red light blinked like a heartbeat. I slid him my files one by one like a magician laying down cards. The cafe audio, Kayla's testimony, Marisol's, the goddaughter's envelope, Pastor Ruth's envelope, Miss Ann's letter, the superintendent's signature, the screenshot of his text to me the night I came home from the hospital years ago. Martinez didn't look away. He asked questions with dates in them. He asked for permission to make copies. He asked if we felt safe. Then he said the thing I needed most. "We're going to do this by the book. Carefully, thoroughly. Do not confront him alone." I meant to follow that instruction. I did. But predators also write scripts for rooms with doors that close, and I needed his voice near a mic he didn't control. He invited me to speak at a community night about forgiveness. I said yes and asked if we could chat beforehand. He smiled in his reply. Yes, a smile in text. Men like him can do that. Of course, kiddo. My stomach rolled. I put a pen camera in my jacket pocket and practiced turning it on without looking. The community night smelled like coffee and cheap cookies. String lights zigzagged across a ceiling that should have never held a wolf. People hugged and laughed with the relief that comes from believing you live in a decent town. He introduced me like a prize he'd won. Naomi has an inspiring story of healing. I took the mic and told a story about anger turning into service. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth yet. When I handed the mic back, he leaned close. "Beautiful," he murmured. "You're proof people can be guided into forgiveness." I said, softly, "Forgiveness is easier when someone tells the truth." He straightened, because pride is a leash you can tug with one finger if you know how. "I've always told the truth," he said into a live mic, "just not to people who can't handle it." The room chuckled, assuming a joke. I tucked that sentence into the ledger like a nail I'd need later. 2 days after, a story broke 2 counties over. Councilman resigns amid inappropriate conduct allegations. The byline belonged to the same reporter who wrote the old, inconclusive piece about our town. I sent her an email. "That door you knocked on? It's opening." She responded, "When and where?" We chose our ground, the town hall, the same stage where he'd been praised for years. We chose our timing, the awards night with half the city in folding chairs. We chose our method, truth in his own voice, then truth in ours, then the law. Martinez put 2 plainclothes in the back. Dana sat on the aisle with a folder thicker than a phone book. That week, I learned the rhythm of fear at 1:13 a.m., 2:47 a.m., 3:22 a.m. An SUV idled outside my building. My doorknob trembled when the shower ran. A bouquet showed up without a card, white lilies, funeral flowers, with the stems cut short like somebody was trying to make them fit where they didn't belong. I photographed everything and texted Martinez every time. He logged it all. He told me to leave my apartment if I didn't feel safe, so I slept on Marisol's couch for 2 nights, counting her cat's purrs to keep my breath even. On the morning of the ceremony, I ironed a blazer until the seams felt like armor. I put my hair back so my face would read like a headline, "Woman not here to tremble." I tucked a second phone into my inner pocket, loaded with the clips I would need if the house system failed. I rehearsed the way my thumb would move over the screen. I texted Kayla, "Only if you want to." She replied, "I have a voice." The hall was a familiar diorama: flags, ferns, a podium, a row of politicians with practiced smiles. He hugged the mayor, shook hands with a police captain, and winked at a woman on the committee who blushed like she was 17. People like him metabolize a room in seconds. They know exactly which corners will clap the loudest. I didn't sit. I stood in the back with my breath in my ribs and my phone in my palm and the weight of 100 stories behind my sternum like a tide waiting for the moon. His introduction was a perfume of phrases that used to work on me: tireless service, pillar of stability, friend to youth. When he stepped up, he led with a joke about getting old and how he hoped the plaque came with free coffee. People laughed, grateful for ease. He thanked donors by name and asked for a hand for the volunteers. He turned toward us, the nameless young women who keep me inspired to be my best self. I watched a woman in row 3, pearls tight at her throat, sit up straighter like a wire inside her pulled. I took the aisle between knees, tilted my phone, and pressed play. The first clip landed like a wrench on a quiet floor. Some girls need attention. That's how you teach boundaries. His laugh rode the top of the words. The second clip followed before he could make a shape out of the silence. Rumors happen when people don't understand intimacy. The third clip was my favorite because arrogance loves to hear itself describe its own genius. Trust is a resource. I know how to build it. The mic squealed like feedback from the room's spine being plugged in. People looked at him, then at me, then at the mayor, and nobody moved because the movement was happening inside their faces. He tried to speak, but I was already lowering my phone like a judge laying down a gavel. "Naomi," he said, my name like a scold, like winter. "What are you doing?" His voice tried to wrap itself around me the way it used to. It found edges now. "Listening," I said, loud enough to echo off old wood. "Same as everyone else." And we did, but not just to him anymore. Marisol stood, smoothed her skirt, and turned to face the crowd like she was taking a new kind of order. At the nonprofit gala, he told me I was lucky to have his attention. I told myself I imagined his hand. Her voice didn't shake. The room did. A girl 2 rows back, one I didn't know, covered her mouth with her program, the paper trembling. The goddaughter rose next, sleeves pushed to her elbows, a deliberate reclaiming of skin. "You told my mom you'd guide me," she said, eyes on him. "You taught me what it costs to be quiet." A woman in pearls whispered to the man next to her. He mentored my niece, like a prayer that just learned its God had teeth. He reached for the mic, because control is a reflex and microphones are how men like him inject calm into a room. Pastor Ruth got there first. "Not tonight," she said, and the crowd made a sound I'd never heard here before. Agreement like thunder.
The second twist walked up the aisle on arthritic knees, the former superintendent, my ex's father. He looked smaller without his office. He cleared his throat like he wanted to cough up a decade. 3 years ago, he said to the back of the room, a teacher brought me letters. I told her the district couldn't afford a scandal. I told myself I was protecting our kids. I protected myself. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Naomi. Then he faced the mayor. I have a statement ready. Shame doesn't often stand up in a room like that and name itself. When it does, walls learn to listen. I lifted my other phone for the final nail in this public part, the time-stamped text he sent me the night I got home from the hospital years ago. Don't ruin a good man's life. He'd denied contacting me. He forgot phones remember what men refuse to. Martinez stood in the back of the hall with his jaw set. The blue wash of police lights spilled through the glass. The officers came down the aisle like an answer. He laughed when they touched his elbow. It sounded thin. This is harassment, he told the room. This is slander. He looked to the places he had always found rescue. Council members, donors, pastors, the mayor. The mayor refused to take the plaque from him. The donors stared at their shoes. The pastors kept their hands folded, not in prayer now, in refusal. The cuff clicks were soft as rain. He left the stage still trying to find the microphone that would make this go away. No one clapped. Not for him, not for me. The sound the room made was stranger and better than applause. It was outrage learning it had a home. His face hit the local channels before I made it back to my apartment. I muted everything and still heard him everywhere. The radio in the bodega downstairs, the TV in the laundromat, the neighbor's tablet through our shared wall. Community leader arrested, the anchors said, trying to pitch their voices to the middle register where people can keep chewing. The word that made my lungs feel like they had room was the one that crawled along the bottom of the screen in a red bar. Predator. Not alleged saint, not misunderstood mentor. Predator. My inbox split into 2 categories almost immediately. Love letters from strangers and knives wrapped in scripture. You're so brave, the first group wrote, lots of pink hearts and queen emojis. You're destroying a good man, the second group wrote, and they always used my full name like a scolding. Why didn't you move on? A woman asked, furious and tired in equal measure. I didn't respond to any of them. I threw my phone on my bed and stood under hot water until my skin flushed, and the fog on the mirror breathed in, breathed out. Then I opened my laptop and wrote a list titled, Things I Can Actually Control. It had 12 items. Number 1 was sleep. Number 2 was food that had color in it. Number 3 was who I let into my apartment. Number 4 was which routes I took to work. Number 5 was what I gave the DA and when. Number 6 was plants that might not die. Number 12 was whether or not I ever stepped into that town hall again. The legal threats started like clockwork. Letters from his lawyer accusing us of slander, a voicemail heavy with implied lawsuits. Dana handled those like she was swatting flies. Phone calls measured, replies precise. She told them to put it in writing.
And they did. And then she filed those letters into a folder labeled with an index number and a future date. The safety threats were sloppier. An envelope slid under my door with 3 photos inside. Me at the corner store, me unlocking my building, me waiting at the bus stop like a normal human who deserves ordinary. Just the message that someone wanted me to know I was being watched. Martinez took the envelope with gloved hands, bagged it, and added my building to the patrol route. "You're not alone," he said. It's amazing how much that sentence can do for a person's heart. We prepped for the hearing in a room that could have been a dentist's office if the chairs had been a little meaner. Dana made me read my statement out loud until my voice stopped doing the small panic quiver on the word locked. She made me practice the kind of stillness that reads as credible in rooms built by another century's rules. "You don't owe anybody perfect composure," she said, catching my eye over the stack of papers, "but I want you to feel your spine even if your knees are jelly." She grinned. "We're going to make them hear you even if they don't like the sound." Court is never like TV, except for the part where your stomach knows what stakes feel like. The fluorescent lights felt like interrogation. The seal over the judge's head felt like a dare. He wore a navy suit that used to make women at church call him a gentleman. Now it made him look like a real estate agent auditioning for a part he'd already lost. His lawyer introduced the phrase, misinterpreted mentorship, as if language could launder the stain out of a bruise. The judge looked over the top of her glasses at him the way teachers do when they catch a child posing. Kayla spoke like her mouth was a new instrument she had learned to play all summer. Notes clear, breath steady. She didn't say everything, she said enough. Marisol talked with her hands, drawing a box in the air and then stepping out of it with words. The goddaughter spoke third. The courtroom held its breath for her like a choir waiting on the downbeat. She said, "You taught me to be quiet. I learned to be loud. I don't cry easily in public anymore. I cried then."
When it was my turn, the clerk said, "State your name," and I said it. "Age," and I said it. "Tell us what happened," and I did, like I was laying bricks in a path for a jury to walk across a river. I didn't get graphic, I didn't need to. I explained what it means when someone holds your reputation in one hand and your future in the other and tells you your silence is how good people do community. I explained that bodies freeze, that doors lock, that words like misunderstood become gas lamps if you hold them near enough to a girl's face. His lawyer tried the old script. Why didn't you report right away? Why did you respond to his emails? Why did you go to that community night if you were afraid? "I don't expect the world to behave," I said, voice steady now that I'd warmed it up on the truth. "I expect the court to weigh evidence." I nodded at the exhibits, the audio clips with his own words, the old letters from the teacher, the superintendent's affidavit, the text he sent me that night with a timestamp that pinned him to my skin like a map pin. The judge told his lawyer to sit down. We walked out into microphones and camera lenses. "Statement?" a reporter asked, hair perfect in the humid heat. I said one sentence into a forest of sticks and red lights. "We didn't do this to ruin a man. We did it to keep girls breathing." Then Dana steered me away because we are not pets of the news and we had better things to do than feed a cycle. Healing didn't swan dive into my life after that. It showed up like a neighbor who knocks and then opens the door without waiting. It sat on my couch and put its feet on my coffee table and turned on my favorite show and didn't ask if I wanted company. I started sleeping 3 hours in a row, then 4, then a whole night that made the morning taste like victory. I cooked eggs and they tasted like food. I took a shower and didn't stare at the drain like I was waiting for something to crawl out. I planted a pothos that didn't die. I bought a second plant and named it Courage. My balcony started to look like a place where a person could breathe without remembering what it cost to do so the last time. I kept the ledger, not just the files. Those went to Martinez and the DA, but the mental list of names of women who used to cover their elbows and now roll their sleeves with intent. The DA added charges like beads on a string. The counsel took his name off a committee list like erasing could be repentance. The church issued a statement with 3 paragraphs and 6 Bible verses, and one apology that wasn't bad for a first draft. Miss Anne sent me a postcard with a poem about truth and another about winter. I put them on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon, because sometimes you need the universe to commit to a metaphor. The day after the verdict, the town's noise changed. Same streets, same buses, same church bells and school bells, but the soundtrack underneath everything had a different key. It wasn't awe anymore. It wasn't the reverent hum people made when they said his name like a password. It was a mix of relief and embarrassment and anger and something like resolve. People were practicing new sentences out loud, and you could hear it at the grocery store, on the sidewalk, in the line at my cafe when someone said, "We should have seen it," and someone else replied, "Maybe we did and we didn't want to." I took a long shower and finally washed the ceremony out of my hair. Then I changed my phone background from the screenshot of my ledger to a photo I took on a bus, sunlight hosing down a street of red brick row houses, laundry flapping like flags of surrender. I kept the ledger, obviously. I just didn't need to stare at it every time I unlocked my screen to breathe. Little acts of permission add up. I texted Kayla a confetti emoji and the words, "You were thunder." She texted back a lightning bolt and, "So were you." Marisol sent a photo of a cake she baked that said in frosting, "Believe girls is not radical." The goddaughter, who had finally told me her name and asked me to keep it safe, sent me a voice note of her laughing. Just laughing. I played it 3 times, then saved it in a folder named Future. Not everyone congratulated me. My inbox still had knives. "You ruined a good man's life. You should have kept it in God's hands. You're exaggerating. I've known him for 20 years. Martinez reminded me the block button is also a boundary, and Dana reminded me that silence after a verdict can be strategic. She said, "You don't owe rebuttals to strangers. Go eat lunch." So I did. It tasted like food, not like proof that I was still in my body. I ate slowly, like somebody who expects the next bite to be there when she reaches for it. The legal team called with next steps: victim impact statements, a timeline for sentencing, conditions of custody. It's not glamorous. This part is paperwork and commas and getting your name spelled right on documents that will outlive your feelings. We worked with the DA to map out support for anyone who came forward post-verdict, because people do come forward after the first door opens. The phone at the crisis center proved that theory for days. We had 3 women in their 50s sit in our office and say, "I didn't have words for it then," and then find the words. We had a man call for his sister who won't speak, but I need to know what to do. We sent links, we stored statements, we made coffee, and we believed them. The ledger had always been bigger than my files. Now the community started building its own.
Then the town started cleaning its house. The nonprofit he'd chaired released a new safeguarding policy so robust it could hold a bridge. The church announced an external audit of any mentorship ministry that put a single adult in a room with a teen and a closed door. The school board, freshly reconstituted since the superintendent's resignation, instituted mandatory training that focused on grooming dynamics, not myths about monsters in alleyways. Watching policy catch up to pain isn't satisfying in the way a cinematic takedown is, but it's the kind of satisfaction you feel in your bones, like a building settling on a reinforced beam. My mother cried the first time I came to Sunday dinner without scanning the street twice before I got out of the car. She said, "I prayed for courage between green beans and cornbread, and I didn't know God would answer by making my daughter a microphone." I laughed, then cried, then ate more cornbread than a person needs. My father repaired the wobbly leg on my coffee table and said, "You did good, kiddo," which is the way he has always put love into simple sentences so they don't break. The press kept calling. I stopped answering. When a national show reached out offering a segment, Dana asked, "Do you want to relive this for millions?" I said no. I wanted to live it once, get the outcome, and then hand the space to other people.
We gave a statement through the crisis center that redirected attention to training and resources and slid out of the way. There were weird moments too, the sideways looks, the gossip that's just old habits trying to reincarnate. An older woman from church cornered me in the cereal aisle and asked, "Do you think forgiveness might speed your healing?" I said, "Forgiveness is for me, not him." And yes, it already has, but not the public kind you're asking me to perform for your comfort. She looked confused, then thoughtful, then sad. She put Raisin Bran in her cart and said, "You remind me of my sister." I don't know what that meant. Maybe it doesn't matter. At the sentencing hearing, the courtroom felt like the same room in new clothes. He looked smaller. The suit hung off him like it missed his old posture. The judge read out the counts again. The victim's initials, the dates. People forget that courts also protect the accused. Boundaries go both ways. It's a strange kindness to watch a system that failed you before do its best to be fair. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't think about him. I thought about the 19-year-old version of me who could barely stand upright in a shower, pressing my forehead to the tile so the sound of the water would drown out the echo of his voice. I am not here to ask for mercy or severity, I told the judge. I am here to ask for accuracy. Name what he did. Name what it costs. Then sentence him according to that truth. The sentence landed like a number that meant time I would never get back and safety some girls will now keep. Years. Not forever. We don't do forever for much. But years that say this was not a misunderstanding, this was a crime. He tried to meet my eyes when they let him out. I looked at the court seal again. I prefer symbols that aren't his face. Afterwards, we went to Pastor Ruth's fellowship hall. Not for a victory party, because justice tastes like ash and honey at the same time, but for soup and a place to put our bodies down together. The superintendent came. He stood up, uninvited, and said, "I can't fix what I enabled by refusing to look. I can only tell you that my name will appear beneath the new policy we adopt, and it will say, 'I was wrong. Here is what we will do differently.'" He sat. We ate soup in a silence heavy with grief and relief. Then my late twist found me in the quietest way. An email from his former administrative assistant. She attached a PDF of a calendar export and a note that read, "I didn't have the courage then. I do now. Please keep my name out of it if you can." The file filled gaps we'd never needed to fill for the verdict. Blocks of time labeled mentorship that moved like shells in a game, canceled and rebooked and rescheduled in a pattern that matched the days we now knew he'd targeted people. She hadn't known what she was documenting at the time. She was doing her job. She wrote, "He said he wanted to optimize his weeks. I thought I was helping." I forwarded it to Martinez for the archive. It won't change the sentence, but sometimes the last nail doesn't go in to hold the wall. It goes in so the builders who come later understand how the house is made. I walked home in the early dark with my scarf up against a fall wind that had finally learned to feel like a season and not a threat. A teenager on a skateboard nearly clipped me and yelled, "Sorry," then smiled over his shoulder like the world was still big and mostly good, and I believed him more than I used to. When the headlines cooled, the building work started in earnest. The boring, beautiful stuff that turns a scandal into a safer town. The council formed a review committee whose members were not his friends. The school board hired an outside consultant who didn't come preloaded with excuses. The church swapped platitudes for protocols. The nonprofit rewrote its volunteer manual from the ground up, so that mentorship stopped meaning alone, unobserved, unaccountable. I finished my degree at a folding table in my living room.
highlighting with a purple marker until my notes looked like they were bruised on purpose. On graduation day, I wore a cheap gown that rustled like a secret, and a smile so wide my cheeks ached. My name over the loudspeaker felt like a small town promising to remember how to pronounce the truth. After the ceremony, I hugged my mother on the lawn, and she whispered, "This was for 19-year-old you." I whispered back, "And for every girl who learned to swallow her shout." Then we took selfies and sent them to Marisol, who replied with a photo of cookies cooling on a rack and the caption, "Come get sugar." At the crisis center, I started the job I'd wanted back when I thought I was too broken to be useful to anyone. The work is both heavier and lighter than I imagined. The phone rings. I answer. Sometimes all I do is say, "That wasn't your fault," and the person on the other end sobs like the dam finally broke. Sometimes I walk someone through safety planning, which is just the complicated phrase for how do we make it through the night. Sometimes I connect a teacher to a training that will make her classroom the opposite of a closed matter. Sometimes I sit and drink water after a call and look at a photo on my desk of sunlight on a bus window and remember to unclench my jaw. I became the kind of woman who carries a whistle in her tote bag, not because I expect to need it, but because I like the weight. I carry a USB drive on my keychain with the kind of files I hope I never have to open again. I keep a list of pro bono lawyers on a note card in my wallet because sometimes a person will trust a stranger with a laminated list before they'll trust the internet. I switched to a grocery store a mile farther away because the route makes me feel safer. Healing looks like choices other people might call inconvenient. I call them worth it. Once a week, I meet Kayla for a walk. She cut her hair and dyed the ends copper. "I wanted to look like the sun had a say," she joked the first time I saw it. But her eyes said it wasn't a joke at all. We talk about classes and jobs and podcast recommendations, and occasionally, briefly, about winter. She's considering a transfer. I told her that leaving isn't failure, it's mastery of a map, of a life. Marisol opened a bakery on a side street that used to be known for boarded-up windows. Now it's known for cardamom buns. The goddaughter sent me a selfie from a campus 2 hours away with the caption, "I changed my major to psychology. I want to sit with people the way you sat with me." I sent her a photo of my desk with a sticky note on it that said, "You are already that woman. School will give you words for it." Sometimes I still wake up at 2:47 a.m. I still hear the doorknob jiggle in the pipes in my walls. I still count 5 things I can see, 4 I can touch, 3 I can hear, 2 I can smell, 1 I can taste. The difference now is that I don't mistake those nights for a relapse. I treat them like weather. They pass. I make tea. I write a line in a notebook. I text myself the sentence on my mirror just to see it glow on a dark screen. My silence was never consent. It was fear. My voice isn't vengeance. It's oxygen. Every story needs a public ending, though. Ours got one a year to the day after the town hall. We didn't ask the mayor to organize it. We didn't ask the church. We didn't ask the council. We rented the hall with pooled money and set up a long table covered in butcher paper and markers. People brought casseroles and index cards. On the cards, they wrote promises instead of applause. I will believe my students. I will learn how grooming works. I will stop calling men good just because they're polite. I will step between a girl and a man pretending to be a mentor if my stomach says something's off. We taped the cards to the wall where the plaque used to hang.
The wood had little holes from the old mounting. The promises looked like constellations, and the holes looked like stars. A reporter showed up with a camera crew. No speech? No ceremony? Pastor Ruth smiled and handed her a marker. She said, "Just write a promise and tape it up." The reporter hesitated, then wrote, "I will ask better questions." She stuck it to the wall and stepped back like she'd never been prouder to be blurry in a shot. Some stories are better when the camera has no hero to frame. The last person to arrive that night was Miss Anne. She walked slow and easy, like a woman who has stopped carrying the weight of everyone else's denial. She pressed a card into my hand that said, in her neat loops, "I will never let anyone call the truth inconclusive without a fight." We stood together under the new constellation and let our shoulders rest.
I won't lie and tell you the town changed overnight. It didn't. There are still people who wish I'd done it quietly. There are still doors that prefer to close. There are still men who will learn the wrong lesson and decide to leave rooms in a huff instead of staying and learning the right one. But the soundscape is different now, and sometimes that's the first proof you get. You can hear a place clearing its throat to speak differently. There's a part of this story I haven't told yet because it belongs to my own heart more than to the town. I forgave myself, not him. My forgiveness isn't a key to a cell, and I won't feed it to his lock. I mean me. I forgave 19-year-old Naomi for freezing. I forgave 21-year-old Naomi for answering his email. I forgave 23-year-old Naomi for practicing smiles in the mirror so people would stop asking if she was okay. I forgave myself for not pressing the red button in a room I thought would swallow me whole if I made a sound. No judge could give me that, and no microphone could capture it. It happened in my kitchen at 11:38 p.m. with my feet cold on tile and my hands wrapped around a mug. I said out loud, "You did what you needed to do to survive." And my shoulders dropped like the end of a long sentence. I also learned friendship again, this time without the weird calculus of who knows who and who likes who and who benefits if I stay quiet. I learned the names of the birds my neighbor feeds: housefinch, mourning dove, cardinal with a mate who bosses him like a queen. We made up names for the gulls that stray this far in storms, accountant birds, because they look like they're checking your work. We talk about weather and books and the best route to the farmer's market. We do not talk about him. It feels like reclaiming a slice of my life that he never got to write in. There was one more letter I didn't expect, the ex-boyfriend. He wrote me a plain, unperformed apology that didn't ask to be forgiven, only acknowledged his father's role and his own silence after I told him I needed a semester off for my mental health years ago. "I thought I was being supportive," he wrote. "I didn't ask why. I didn't ask who. I see now that my comfort required your secrecy." He closed with, "I am willing to talk if you ever want to. I will also respect never hearing from you again." I stared at the screen for a long minute, felt nothing sharp, and then surprised myself by replying, "Thank you for not asking anything of me in this. Take care." Closure doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just the absence of a hook in your skin. If you're waiting for me to say I fell in love after all that, I didn't. At least not the way stories sometimes demand as proof that a protagonist is okay now. I did fall in love with a few ordinary things: morning light on my plant leaves, the exact song of a bus's brakes on a cold day, the way Kayla's laugh changed from a tight chuckle to a messy cackle, the smell of Marisol's bakery at 6 a.m., the sound of my own footsteps at 10 p.m. when the air isn't a threat. Maybe someday I'll fall for a person who understands that loving me means loving the girl who pressed play in a room full of people who preferred applause. For now, I'm busy loving the life I built with both hands. Somebody asked me recently, if he had apologized sincerely, Would you have done it differently? I thought about that long and hard. Here's my answer. Apologies don't rewind rooms. They don't unlock doors that were locked. They don't unteach young women that their silence is community service. An apology would have been for him. The public truth was for us. I'd still choose the hall, the mic, the chorus. I'd still choose daylight. If you're in a town like mine and there's a man like him, polite in public, teeth in private, here's what I learned, practical and simple, because simple travels. Start small. Document for your future self. Tell one safe person. Use your phone like a tool, not an altar. Back up. Make a ledger. Ask questions in rooms he thinks are his. Invite allies who aren't impressed by charm. Never do it alone if you can avoid it. Trust your stomach more than you trust anyone's reputation. If you need to go public, choose a stage that can hold you. Put cops in the room. Put witnesses in the aisles. Press play. That night at the hall, I said a sentence that people now put on posters and mugs that I didn't authorize. You thought my silence was your safety, but my voice is louder than your lies. It still burns when I say it, but now the burn is clean. A year later, I still use it, on myself, when the 2:47 a.m. ghosts show up, for girls who come in whispering and leave with their shoulders an inch lower. I write it at the top of resource sheets. I tuck it into the bottom of grant proposals. My voice is louder than your lies. Not because I shouted, because I chose the room where lies finally sound like what they are, brittle. People sometimes ask me to talk to their daughters. I say yes, and then I say no to the part where they want me to be gentle to a fault. I tell girls the truth. You don't owe anyone politeness that costs you your peace. You can be rude if a man is trying to put his hand on your life. Your body is not a classroom for men who couldn't be bothered to learn boundaries on their own time. If an adult calls you kiddo and you don't like it, tell him not to. If he keeps doing it, tell someone else. If no one listens, tell me. The crisis center's number is taped to the inside of my phone case so I can hand it to a stranger without fumbling.
Sometimes I pass the town hall, and I can still see the moment in the air. The plaque hovering, the mayor's face changing shape, the way the room turned as one organism when the audio cut. It doesn't feel like a wound anymore. It feels like a hinge. The town swings differently now. So here we are, at the end of a story that isn't an end at all. He is where the court says he belongs. His appeals failed. His network shrank to 3 men and a cousin who think loyalty means defending the indefensible. The organizations that used to feature him on flyers now feature policies and phone numbers instead. The school board amended its handbook with language I helped write, though my name isn't on it. I don't need it to be. I like watching sentences I needed years ago become instructions for people who haven't needed them yet. The last late twist belongs to me. I used to think revenge was the same as justice, and maybe at the beginning it was my doorway. I won't lie to you, pressing play tasted like revenge. Watching the cuffs close tasted like revenge. Seeing his name crawl across the bottom of the screen with the right word beside it tasted like revenge. But then the flavor changed. The doorway opened into a house I didn't know I could build. The rooms are labeled things like policy and practice and power and people. Justice lives there. Healing sleeps there. Revenge visits sometimes with messy hair and muddy shoes and laughs in my kitchen, and I am grateful for the part it played. But it doesn't get a key. I keep the keys. I keep other things too. Candles, a whistle, a USB, a laminated list of lawyers, the plant named Courage. A deck of index cards with promises from the town pinned to my wall with washi tape. The sound of girls' voices saying, "I believe me now." The taste of Marisol's buns. The feel of Kayla's copper hair when she hugged me after cutting it. The way the goddaughter's laughter sounds like the first day of spring. I keep a copy of Miss Ann's letter, where she wrote with the stubbornness of a woman who refused to misplace her students in administrative folders, "I believe these girls." It's taped inside the cupboard where I keep my mugs. Every morning when I make coffee, I see it. It still does something to my shoulders. When I tell this story on my channel, there's a moment I always come back to. The half second when the applause died and the truth lived. That hinge, that breath, that sound of a room learning it has a spine. You can't bottle it. You can chase it. You can build rooms that ask for it. You can be the person who presses play. You can be the person who stands up second. You can be the person who says to the reporter, "Write a promise." You can be the teacher who refuses to let inconclusive be the final word. You can be the superintendent who shows up with an affidavit and the words, "I was wrong." You can be the assistant who finally forwards the calendar file. You can be the cop who shows up with handcuffs and respect. You can be the baker who writes "believe girls" in frosting because sometimes sugar is how we learn new words. And you can be the girl who was 19 and freezing and thought silence was safer, and who now sits with other girls and says, "I know the sound of that lock. Here's how we open it." This is me, Naomi, 26 years old, living in a small apartment with plants that keep refusing to die, a balcony that faces a tree, and a list on my fridge titled "Things I Can Actually Control" that is longer than it used to be. I still take different routes sometimes. I still sleep with one ear open on windy nights, but the air doesn't smell like winter all the time. It smells like rain and bread and coffee and the inside of a room that has been aired out after someone finally opened the windows. Before I go, I want to speak directly to you, wherever you're watching from, whatever time zone, whatever kind of town. If there is a man in your world who is praised in daylight and dangerous in the dark, I am not going to tell you to be brave. I'm going to tell you to be strategic. Courage without a plan gets hurt. Courage with a plan changes rooms. Tell one person. Document one thing. Ask one question with a straight face in a room he thinks is his. Build your ledger. Find your Pastor Ruth, your Miss Ann, your Marisol, your Martinez, your Dana, your Kayla, your goddaughter who becomes her own hero in her own time. And when you're ready, pick a stage, put cops in the aisles, and press play. The applause will die. The truth will live. And the sound the room makes after will carry you farther than you think. 2 last things. I want to hear from you. If this had been your town, your hall, your microphone, what would you have done? And where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city. I map them sometimes. Pinpricks of light across a country that keeps trying to be better than it was yesterday.